How to Create a Glitch Monologues Season 42 Chapter 3. This is Season 42 of How to Create a Glitch in the Matrix Monologues Episode 3. In this episode, we will be talking about the synchronization of the bodily rhythms using an example as well as talking about ways of eliminating seeding of behavior. To start off, I would like to discuss how automatically being rationalized according to a dialectical rationalization undermines the production of entropy. Entropy is fundamentally about a paucity of information. Dialectical pairing means that each dialectical opposite is dialectically defined, reflexively defined, by the other. This means that pairing those two dialectical pairings gives you complete information since they represent only 2 degrees of freedom. Now, in the past few episodes, we have talked about how there are 9 different dialogues in every social exchange. We talked about how some of those dialogues lead to changes in behavior, representing the seeding of the corresponding behaviors into the unconscious of the actor. It may have sounded like I was suggesting that multipolar conversations create continuous dialogues at each meeting. But that was not the intention. More like, in the intermeshing of the 9 plates of meaning, some of the supraspatial plates do not require said intersections for the dialogues to continue. I am not saying that people are telepathic exactly. What I am saying is that the consciousness of one becomes embedded in the other, such that a linear stream of consciousness follows along with the actor, so long as they act consistently with the seeded behavior. In other words, we carry with us the minds of our conversational partners. I call these links, gateways, or deference, depending upon the conformation. Now, there are ways to eliminate this following along of others' consciousnesses with our own. First of all, the primary mechanism of this following along is rationalization. To the extent you are integrated, your thoughts are within a fluid exchange with the consciousness which merely follows along. Every action is reflexively rationalized according to the reactive comments of the consciousness which is following along. Such is integration, where every thought is reacted to by other consciousnesses, immediately, preventing decontextualization or orthogonal thought. Now, one of the ways of impeding this process is through, for example, restructuring, which produces thought patterns which are not readily comprehensible in a linear stream. Another way is by doing something which the other would be repulsed by. Since these links are constructed upon empathy and convergence, not avoidance and disgust. Which brings us to the bodily rhythms. Rejection of affirmatory narratives within dissonant consensualities produce avoidance and linking of the disgust sensitivities of the actors. This means that continued contact becomes non-consensual. When this contact occurs, the mind transforms that disgust into digestion and excretion, which re-establishes the link between the disgust sensitivities of the 2 actors and the corresponding avoidance. In other words, we are all linked together in this fashion, there being a kind of momentum transferred from the initiator of non-consensual contact to the recipient. This momentum transfer is not meant in the sense of physics, but rather in the sense that there is some movement in the conditioning of the recipient to re-establish the link with the initiator. Non-consensual spaces are thus largely conditioned by disgust and linking of the digestive cycles of 2 participants. Now, an example. Imagine that you were out of town for a weekend. You come home and start to open the door to your apartment. Now, just as you stick the key in, you are locked in. The neighbor who lives next door opens the door. Now this neighbor doesn't particularly like you and you tend to avoid each other. But the neighbor has already opened the door. So he steps out and you have to move out of the way. You both pretend to apologize and he walks off. You enter your apartment and have to use the washroom. Now what has happened here? The answer is, there was a spatial intersection in a non-consensual space. The action of substitution and displacement represents the transfer of momentum from the neighbor to you, causing you to resynchronize your disgust sensitivities, triggered by using the washroom, after their reaction to you. Now, there are other ways that the disgust sensitivities can be linked, such as taking a dialectical position on social issues or religious issues. When you stand on either side of a fault line with some other, meetings occur in non-consensual spaces, which produce said synchronization. Disgust triggers reaffirm avoidance. But we more frequently form this kind of synchronization with those we live in close proximity since non-consensual meetings are more common. Thus, neighbors, roommates, work associates are all people who can trigger this synchronization and avoidance. That's the end of the podcast for today. Please like, comment and subscribe.